Final assessment of the gateway process training. The objective was to evaluate the effectiveness of the process as a potential means for intelligence collection. Over the course of 1 week, I underwent Hello.
Agent Ramsey.
Yes, sir.
I need your gateway files on my desk by morning.
Right away, sir.
Good work. But I'd tread carefully.
Thank you, sir. Final assessment of the gateway process training. So it finally happened. Twice. It's been well over a month that I got back from the Monroe Institute, and I have been rigorously meditating. What am I saying? Been meditating every day, at least once for about 45 minutes to an hour, if not twice a day. So July 4th is when it happened, the first time. The first time, I will tell you, it felt more like a dream because it was induced through lucid dreaming. I was having a dream. I realized, like, oh, this is a dream. I can go out of body. And when I uttered those words, I guess in my head, in my dream, I felt myself being thrown with such force that it caused a large whooshing sound in the side of my ears, and everything went black. I felt like I was floating. I felt weightless, like I was kind of floating in darkness. And I tried to pry my eyes open. Now, this is something that happened to me on my first out-of-body experience, where I had to try and open my eyes because I couldn't see anything. And then I peeled my eyes open, and to my shock, I was staring at what can only be described as these giant megalithic, round-edged stone cubes that were dark and black and were churning within one another. All right. This sounds insane. I remember just thinking of my body, wiggling my fingers, and I slam back in my body and I wake up. So obviously, a lot of you are gonna say this was just a lucid dream that you had. And it was the same feeling I had when I left my body the first time. Now, does that mean the first out-of-body experience I had was a dream as well? Or does that mean that there is some other type of connection between the two? I don't know. But last night, I had something that resembled my first experience happen to me. I remember waking up at about 1:35 in the morning, and I remember the time because I looked at my phone. So I'd woken up and I felt the urge to go to the bathroom, but I was like, I'm just too tired. I wanted to fall back asleep. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, my body is so relaxed right now. This might be the perfect time to go out of body. So I remember closing my eyes, sinking back into my pillow, and mentally repeating the sentence, I deeply desire to leave my body. I deeply desire to leave my body. I deeply desire to leave my body. And as I said it the third time, I can only describe what felt like my body glitching back and forth and sinking further into the pillow than physically possible. This happened seconds after I closed my eyes, and I was fully aware. At this point, the feeling felt familiar. I knew I was going out of body. It was dark, so I couldn't open my eyes. Once again, I peeled my eyes open, and the perspective I had was like I was in the mattress. It was a very weird perspective, but I remember putting my hands on my mattress and lifting up. And as I look down, I can clearly see my passed out physical body laying there. And that was just enough for me to go, okay, that's enough, and sink back into my physical self, eyes awake, wide awake at this point. Couldn't fall asleep for another half an hour. That was interesting. So this is my journal, and I wanted to share that with you guys. I was kind of defeated coming back from the Monroe Institute on one hand, thinking, God, maybe I can't ever reproduce this. On the other hand, I was absolutely inspired to continue my journey through consciousness work meditating, figuring out what's going on. Now, personally, I would love to have one of these experiences in broad daylight, middle of the day, where I just go and relax and then come out of my body. That would be ideal, because these always seem to happen in the middle of the night, when in that state can be a little nebulous, right? So I would like that to be a little more clear. And I want some more answers about the science behind all of this stuff. Now that I'm coming out of this sort of waking dream that was the Monroe Institute, my rational brain is starting to kick in. I'm beginning to question whether or not everything I felt was actually what I felt, and where's the data, and now, the left side of my brain is activated. So I reached out to somebody, Graham Nicholls. Graham Nicholls, a leading figure in the study of out-of-body experiences. Over the past 2 decades, Graham has not only explored the outer edges of human consciousness, but has also developed innovative technology to aid in these experiences. His creations, like the infraliminal sound device, has opened new possibilities for those seeking to explore consciousness beyond the physical realm. And in 1999, while developing some of his systematic techniques for achieving OBEs, he found himself leaving his body and witnessing an explosion in downtown London that would occur 5 days later. And this case of precognition was unique in that it was also witnessed by 5 other people.
My name is Graham Nicholls, and I am a specialist in out-of-body experiences. It was 1999 when it happened. I just developed the G technique, which is one of the methods that I use for initiating out-of-body experiences, and I decided to teach this to a few of my friends. There was basically a group of 5 of us. I started to explain the technique to everyone, and then I started demonstrating it, and then everyone sort of moved away from each other, and we started to practice the technique. And I was doing the technique, and I thought, actually, maybe this isn't a very good technique. It doesn't seem to be doing anything or working particularly. And it was like almost as soon as I thought that, something just hit me like a ton of bricks. I went into like a really deep state, and I went down onto the ground and went into an out-of-body experience. Initially, I was moving through a natural environment, almost like a jungle setting or a forest setting. That lasted for a short amount of time, and then that split. It almost just kind of shifted from that, and then I found myself standing on the corner of Moore Street and Old Compton Street in Soho in central London. Then I looked across, and there was a restaurant, Italian restaurant, that I used to go to sometimes, so I knew exactly where I was. And then suddenly there was an explosion, and a man ran past me towards the explosion. It was almost like he was trying to go to help or something. And then I saw all the chaos and the smoke and everything, panicking, and the general chaos. And then a few moments after the explosion, I felt this energy sort of hit me in the chest, that was quite physical and tangible, kind of strike in my chest, not painful again, but just like a kind of pressure and very intense. And as that happened, that kind of pulled me back out of the experience, and I went into a kind of void, like I was at a very rudimentary level of consciousness, and there I couldn't see or hear anything. I was just in this still space. One of the other people there, a guy called Chris and a guy called Lawrence, had noticed that something was wrong, essentially, that something very intense and powerful was happening to me. So they'd come over to me, and they were trying to sort of coax me out of this state. Came out of it, and I described that I'd had this experience, and it was all bluish grey, which is something that happens consistently in veridical experiences that I've had. I've had maybe 4 different experiences that have had this blue-grey quality, and each of them have been objective in terms of the information that I perceived. I said that I felt that it was precognitive, and I'd seen this bombing on Old Compton Street at the far right of the street, and that I had this, I didn't know why, but I had this conviction that I felt that it was going to happen.
In 1999, we were part of a research group. We met about OBEs. He had developed something called the G technique, which he wanted to demonstrate to us. He went into a trance to show this to us. At first, not much happened, but as time progressed, he became more and more agitated. After a while, one of us brought him out of it, and he told us what he had seen. He felt it was definitely precognitive. He described basically being at the corner of Old Compton Street and Moore Street in Soho in central London. Said he looked down Old Compton Street and he saw an explosion happen about 100 meters away from him. It happened on the right side of the street, and he could see people running away from the explosion that had been in it. And what happened was that 5 days later, on the 30th of April, there was an explosion. It happened in the area that he had seen at the Admiral Duncan pub.
At least 2 people are now known to have died in tonight's bomb explosion in Soho in central London.
The device exploded around 6:30. The target, the Admiral Duncan in Soho's Old Compton Street.
I'd never had anything precognitive before. I was quite skeptical about it. I didn't really understand how something like that could be possible. It's unique because it was witnessed by people, so that was, I don't know of another experience like that.
Did any of you feel the need to, at any point, perhaps contact someone?
Well, like I said, I'd never had anything like that before, so I was skeptical myself. I felt this intuitive sense that it was going to happen, but then at the same time, the other side of me was like, but no, how can precognition be real? That doesn't make any sense. So I just didn't know where to put that. I knew enough about psychics and stuff contacting the police to know that that's generally
Frowned upon.
You know, they're generally not, they're not going to take that seriously. And I also didn't want to sort of necessarily waste their time. If maybe I'd had a strong sense of it's definitely happening on the 25th of the month or something like that, then maybe that would have been more relevant.
That would have also made you a little bit suspicious, I would think. Right?
Yeah.
Hearing this from, like, you know, if I'm a police officer and you're telling me this information and I brush it off, and then 5 days later this happens, I mean, clearly you're the number one suspect in this case. You know, so maybe it's a good thing that you didn't contact anyone at the time.
I mean, we definitely talked about it. It was definitely, I did avoid the area personally, and I believe everyone else that I told did as well.
So when this happened, I mean, this is obviously breaking news. This is all over the place. It's a terrible tragedy. There was, I think, 30 people injured and 3 people eventually passed away. Leading up to this, we're at day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. Were you starting to let go of this notion, this premonition during that time?
Actually, I felt heightened for several days afterwards, so right up until the actual event happened.
What do you mean heightened?
Things happened. I got on a bus a few days after, maybe even the next day. I don't remember exactly which day it was, but I had a strong feeling of a friend who I'd known in the past, and I hadn't seen for I think at least 2 years, 2 years, something like that. Well, I just had a strong feeling of that person, and then a short while later he got onto the bus. Not close enough that I could have perceived him, but you know, it was maybe like 3 or 4 stops later he got onto the bus. So that was again like another sign, I guess, of this precognitive type aspect going on. So yeah, I was in an unusual state for at least a few days afterwards.
So now day 5, how did you hear the news?
I believe that I saw it on the television on the news. Yeah, I remember watching it, and then it slowly dawning on me. It wasn't like an instantaneous thing, but it slowly dawning on me that, oh, this is exactly what I saw. Because I guess the coverage looked different to what I'd seen in the actual experience. The coverage was obviously talking to people outside the bit. It wasn't footage of the actual explosion like I'd seen in the experience. And someone mentioned Soho, and then I was like, oh, and then someone mentioned, Old Compton Street. And so slowly I started to realize, oh, this is exactly what I saw.
It's kind of like a bittersweet thing then, because obviously terrible tragedy on one hand, but on the other hand, you must have said to yourself, holy shit, this is real. This was real, And that's a major piece of validation.
Yeah.
And this is really interesting. And the work that Dr. May and Joe McMoneagle had done for years was the higher level of entropy and the more at risk a human life was, the clearer the target would become for them. And so this having all of those ingredients came in the form of a stronger session of remote viewing, which resulted in out of body. Maybe it amplified that initial sort of instinct that we have to a point that got you out of body and got you directly into that scenario.
Yeah, I agree with their perspective. I think I tend to talk about it in terms of maybe emotional impact, because for example in telepathy research, which I've been involved with as well, mainly with Rupert Sheldrake.
Right.
Within that kind of work, when there's a strong bond between the two participants, it tends to be more successful in terms of psychic research. So I guess I tend to frame it in the sense of emotion or emotional impact or emotional connection.
Now I want to talk about the technology that you've been developing, which helps facilitate out-of-body experiences.
The technology came around because I was thinking a lot about sensory deprivation. I started researching a scientist called John Zubek.
Without getting too sidetracked, this is yet another CIA connection. You see, Zubek devoted his career to researching sensory deprivation, conducting over 15 years of experiments at the University of Manitoba on more than 500 individuals, isolating them from all sensory input for up to 2 weeks. His work paralleled the CIA's MKUltra program, which sought to manipulate human behavior for interrogation purposes. Funded by both the Canadian Defense Department and the US government, Zubek emerged as a leading figure in sensory deprivation research. And Zubek passed away in 1974 due to an apparent suicide by drowning. Fun stuff.
He did things like put himself into a giant sphere, white sphere, for 2 weeks with no sensory input whatsoever. These kinds of things were really interesting to me because they seem to facilitate a more likely out-of-body experience or a heightened form of psi. So then I started to think, well, can I create a form of immersion that would also suggest being out of the body? There was a central platform in a steel structure. The person would lay on this, and then there would be a hypnotic induction. So initially I was working with hypnosis. But what I started to do with sound was I started experimenting with different sound patterns. And then I started doing research into things like flow states and realized that the pre-state to an out-of-body experience is probably the key to the experience. Basically started putting all of these things together, and I still work with all kinds of approaches that basically use all of the senses, because I think if we want to have a complete out-of-body experience, then we need to use something that kind of shuts down all of the extra information coming into us through our ordinary senses, so that the out-of-body senses and perceptions can take over, essentially.
A lot of these out-of-body experiences all seem to, like, the one commonality is the incredibly relaxed state, whether that's through exhaustion, whether that's through sleep, whether that's through cardiac arrest, I guess, or whether that's through just natural meditation. It seems like your body has to be shut down.
Yeah, that's exactly how I would put it.
Now, because I've uploaded this to YouTube, a lot of people have shown interest, and people who have never had an experience don't even know where to start. And obviously, they don't want to pay. A lot of them don't want to pay, thousands of dollars to go on a retreat, not even knowing if that's going to work for them, or like before they invest in anything. What's the best advice you can give them to have their first out-of-body experience?
Don't jump around in terms of techniques. I would say don't even worry too much about techniques. Focus on the pre-state. the state that you get into prior to having the out-of-body experience, like the vibrations, is the most common, but there are others like a void state, and some people get buzzing noises and clicking and things like that, sensory deprivation like I also mentioned. But the most common mistake that people make is they go online, they look at 20, 30 different techniques, and they jump from one to the other like every day, trying like 20 different techniques, and then it doesn't work because they're not getting into that pre-state. So the other advice I would say is work consistently. Pick a technique and work consistently with it. But like I say, focus on the pre-state.
And consistently, you mean every day, twice a day, once a week? What's consistency look like?
Ideally, at least about 3 times a week, I would say.
I think I've taken up enough of your time today, Graham. This has been such an enlightening conversation, and I literally I'm looking forward to reading your work. I'm going to purchase your books. Is there something you want to tell my audience?
There's a new version of my second book coming out, actually, but my first book hasn't changed. That's more my personal experiences. The first book, but it's not scientific though.
Yeah, I think people would like a bit of both anyways. I think that's what this whole experience is about. My channel, it's not just about, the science, but it's also about my personal journey.
Sure.
And I want to thank you for sharing both of those today. So thank you again.
You're very welcome.
If you want to watch the full hour-long interview with Graham, you can do so by becoming an intern on our Patreon. It's thanks to patrons like you that we're able to keep Area 52 alive. And for just half the price of a Starbucks coffee once a month, you'll get early access to all our videos, hours of extra content, and top secret access on our Discord. Now I want to check in with Nelson Dellis, who, by the way, is quickly becoming the unofficial Area 52 field agent at this point. You might remember Nelson from our previous investigation into remote viewing. Nelson decided to sign up for the following gateway program after me, which we'll talk about more on an upcoming podcast. But while there, he had one of the most remarkable remote viewing sessions I've ever heard about.
It was pretty early on in the gateway experience. I think it might have been on day 2. And we had just kind of learned about Focus 10, and we're kind of experimenting with Focus 12, F12. We had done it once. We had kind of come back and debriefed about it. We were instructed, we were about to go into another session, to have a purpose for this one. It was going to be what they called a free flow. And that means you can maybe have a question that you want answered by the universe or your higher self, or you can try to go visit somewhere or have an OBE. And of course, naturally me, I'm very evidence-based, I'm about to spend a week doing this stuff, this hocus pocus stuff. I'm already questioning why I'm even there, if I belong there. This is all so weird and not Nelson-like for me to believe in and be there. It's a bit too woo-woo for me. I had this idea, well, let me try to get some proof, right? That'll set the tone for the week if it comes back with anything, and then I can maybe have a better time believing in this stuff and really diving in. So one of the other members at the experience, I asked them randomly, I was like, hey, before you go up to your session, that person was on another room in another floor, I said, could you write down a 4-digit number on a piece of paper, clear as day, and put it on your desk by your little cubby unit, your bed? And she was like, yeah, that's fine. And so my goal was gonna be, I'm gonna go into my session and I'm gonna have an OBE, float over to her room, see the number, and then afterwards, validate it with her that we have the same number. Cool. Impossible, but cool. So we're going through the session and we're getting deeper and deeper into this meditative state, higher levels of consciousness, whatever. All this mumbo jumbo lingo that I'm starting to learn and still kind of iffy about, nothing, and so nothing's happening, really. I'm trying push out of my body, and I just am not getting this experience that I'm expecting. And after a while, I'm just like, you know what? I'm just forcing this isn't really working. And so I just kind of relax a little more and just let the process happen. I let the visuals appear to my brain. And suddenly, almost without really any force or effort or conjuring.
Now, before some of you get too excited and think that there are some spirits running around his house, Nelson's a father of 4. So what you're actually hearing, although it might be spirits, is probably just his kids.
A little splotch out of the darkness shows up. It wasn't much. It was kind of the contour of a wooden wall. There was some texture to it, and I remember kind of being able to touch it and being like, okay, seems like a wall. Maybe a few seconds later pass, another lit area kind of opens up in my mind. And this time I'm looking kind of downwards at the bottom angle of something. It seemed like an opening to like some kind of bed. And then on the floor next to it were just a bunch of scattered things. And then it closed off. A few seconds passed again, and then it kind of opened up again one last time. What I was seeing now was kind of like at an angle, very shallow angle of incidence, if you want to call it that, at a desk. Clear as day, there was a desk. And clear as day, there was this white piece of paper with 4 numbers on it, 4 digits on it. 1736. And actually that last digit, I remember hesitating because I was like, it's a bit fuzzy. The 173 are very clearly in focus. I know them. There was no question. I'm not making these up. I'm not like making it what I want it to be. It is those numbers. But again, that last digit, for whatever reason, was kind of out of focus. If you imagine like some kind of lens that is focused, the one that's nearest, which is that last digit, would have been slightly out of focus. So I guessed 6. It felt like a 6. I wasn't sure though, and I made a mental note of that. And what I also noticed on that desk, it wasn't just the paper. There were some other things scattered on the desk as well, which I remember thinking was bizarre because I was like, well, if I was actually in this person's room, and they had asked maybe me to do the same thing, I would have cleared the desk and put just the paper to make it super loud, pronounced, easy to see. But this person had other stuff on the table. So I was like, it's kind of careless. Like this person, if they really did this, they probably would have cleared the desk. This can't be their actual thing. I'm not really seeing the thing. There were still doubts in my mind, of course. That closes up into darkness, and that kind of was the end of that experience. I mean, other things happened, but they weren't related to the desk. And so the session ends. I write down the number 1736, and we go out, and we go to the debriefing room, and I see the girl come down the stairs, and she's holding the paper that she wrote it on. I guess she was excited to show me what it was. And there, as clear as day, was 173 and a 4. A 4. Not a 6. But I still got goosebumps on my arms because the odds of that, to get 3 digits in the right spot, it's really like 1 in 1,000, right? Not horrible in terms of odds, like 1 in 1,000 times a person does this, they might get that. Still could be chance. Still felt very validating. I believe that I was there in that person's room. And then later in the day, I said to the girl, hey, I know this is weird, but can I look at your room? I just want to see if it matches, because I still had questions. I was like, okay, cool, I got the number, sort of. But what about the other images I saw? Maybe there's some other things that I see in her room that will validate what other things I saw, like the wall and the corner of the cubby. And so sure enough, we go up to the room. The wall, yeah, it was wood. I knew that. My room was wood too. But that corner was there. And on the floor was littered all of her clothes and shoes and stuff from her suitcase. And even on the table, I had said there were other things other than the number. Sure enough, there were other things scattered around the desk, around where she said she had put the number. The number wasn't there, she had taken the paper out. So that was further validation that I was seeing this specific room, this specific person's room. Because we had just arrived there. So most people were still kind of like living out of their suitcases or had put everything away in drawers. And she told me, she's like, oh, I'm usually very clean, but when I travel to places, to hotel rooms or whatever, I'm always really scattered. So it was so funny that her specifically, and I checked other people's rooms to see, nobody else was messy except her in that regard. So more evidence to me that I actually was in her room and that I saw the number. Not also to say that the font that I saw in my mind matched what she wrote, but that's me just saying that. I have no proof of that. So that was amazing, and I felt like it was a nod from the universe to say like, hey Nelson, here's a little peek into what this stuff can do, the magic that is beyond your physical self. Go and enjoy the rest of the week with that information now.
Now, in a twist of fate, and about a week apart, Nelson and I both ended up having an out-of-body experience. This would be my 5th and latest, and Nelson's first. This actually happened between shooting the podcast and finishing this video, so although we won't be covering these experiences in the upcoming podcast, I will leave the uncut versions of these interviews on the Patreon. So technically this would be my 5th out-of-body experience, including the 2 that I had last year, my 3rd since getting back from Monroe.
Okay, so I was flying from the West Coast, Portland, Oregon, over to the East Coast on a red-eye flight. You know, I had just ran a 40-mile ultramarathon, so I was exhausted.
August 7th, 5:35 a.m., I get up to go to the bathroom, come back into bed, and I'm thinking, I'm pretty relaxed. Last time I did this, we had some pretty good results. But this time, let me pop on some meditation music. So I put the headphones on and I open my Expand app, which is the app from Monroe Institute that has, you know, the sort of binaural beats and this Monroe sound science.
And I decide, suddenly I'm like, oh, well, I should do one of the exercises I got from, it was like a take-home exercise from the Monroe Institute, the Gateway Experience. It's basically a 45-minute guided meditation.
I do a 60-minute Focus 10 meditation. Great meditation, did not fall asleep, didn't click out. I was totally lucid the entire time.
For the most part, I was pretty alert at this point, and it kind of guides you ultimately to this last color of white light, and you cross over this bridge that you imagine in your mind.
And felt that pre-OBE state, that vibratory state where your entire body is sort of finally vibrating is the only way that I can put it. You feel great.
As I'm transitioning and crossing this bridge, almost instantly there was this surge or jolt of electricity that went through me.
And just like before, in my head, I say to myself, I deeply desire to leave my body. And again, the third time I say it, at this point, it's like saying Beetlejuice in the mirror. The third time I say it, I feel myself sinking further into the pillow, almost like I'm phasing into it. Like it feels like what this looks like. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I'm phasing.
Euphoric feeling. And I realized that I could suddenly see through my eyelids. Obviously my eyelids were closed. I was trying to, you know, it was dark in the plane, but I was trying to sleep or relax when my eyes were closed. But suddenly I could see through my eyes, through my eyelids.
Now I feel like I'm in that out-of-body state where I can't see anything and I have to pry my eyes open again. So I try to pry my eyes open, but I don't have any curtains in my room, and the light is peering through, and it's kind of bright. And I don't want to wake myself up because I'm feeling this, you know, sensation. So instead I keep my eyes closed this time. I kind of wait to see if I can, I don't know, see through my eyelids. I remember saying to myself the words, clarity now, demanding clarity. The second I said it, I could start seeing my room through my closed eyes. Now at this point I'm still lucid, but I can see with my eyes closed.
You know, I had to check for a second, are my eyes closed? Yes, they were closed. And yeah, I mean, I could see everything clear as day. And I was very sure, it was very real, a lot of clarity here, that it was real, not my imagination of imagining, you know, what it would be like to open my eyes right now. You know, obviously I'm sitting here with my eyes closed. This is not my physical body. This is my non-physical body seeing. And I'm having an OBE. This is it. I'm in it right now. Hey, if you're having an OBE, try to get out of your body, right? So I knowingly and easily just kind of moved forward out of my body 2-3 feet.
I get up from out of my bed, look back, notice my body, ignore that.
And you know, I kind of glanced around and I could see the guy next to me, the people down the row. I didn't turn around to look at myself, just the choice I made, I guess.
Go to the window, but try to put my hand through the glass. Tonk, I could not go through the glass. It's kind of disappointing. But I decided to open the window. I sort of thrust my body up, very easily by the way, and sort of leapt out the window halfway. And as I was halfway out the window, I hear a voice, "What are you doing?"
And I was really excited. Just so excited, I guess, that after a few seconds, the excitement got too much and I kind of just like shot back into my body, which from what I've heard is pretty common to happen. Like it was unstable or something, or I didn't know how to control it.
So scared, I did not turn around. I kind of crept back in, saw my body, laid down backwards into my body, opened my eyes, and it was now 6:38 a.m. So I popped the meditation at 5:35. It was a 60-minute meditation, bringing me to 6:35. The time that I took to close my eyes, get out of my body, and come back was about 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes. Not enough time for me to fall asleep. I was completely lucid the entire time. I think I'm getting the hang of this.
But the second kind of weird thing is, as I was sucked back into my body. As soon as I hit back, it was kind of paired with another really intense, euphoric, vibratory sensation of kind of being shot through like a portal, a wormhole, or some kind of a tunnel. I remember it feeling so like intense of an experience that I verbally said out loud, like, whoa, or like, oh man, something like that. Like, oh shoot, the guy next to me's gotta be thinking like, what the hell is this guy next to me saying? He's asleep and he's talking in his sleep. So it was a really powerful experience, one that I don't think I'll ever forget. And I think the coolest thing about it is that this is really a trainable skill. I mean, in the end, it's just more proof to me that we are more than our physical bodies. Yeah, I can't believe I'm saying that.
The objective: to evaluate the effectiveness of the gateway process as a potential means of intelligence collection. Over the course of 1 week, I underwent intensive training under the guidance of the Monroe Institute instructors. The training involved the use of hemisync audio technology designed to synchronize the hemispheres of the brain, facilitating out-of-body experiences and altered consciousness, thereby inducing various states of consciousness. Here are my key findings. Consistently achieve deep meditation. Number 1, altered states of consciousness. I consistently achieve deep meditative states and OBEs, thus validating the reliability of the hemisync technology. Number 2, perception and awareness. Perception and awareness. Enhanced awareness and improved information retention, especially in deep relaxation. Number 3, remote viewing. OBEs yielded accurate descriptions of targets. OBEs yielded accurate information during remote viewing sessions. Frankly, the results that we received on the targets were baffling, to say the least. Number 4, psychological and physical effects. The positive and psychological effects include reduced stress, increased focus, and increased focus. There were no adverse physical effects to report. Further recommendations: number 1, further research. Extend studies to assess long-term effectiveness and integrate the gateway process into intelligence gathering. Number 2, training programs. Create structured programs. Include potential interns with ongoing evaluation. And number 3, operational integration. Assess the feasibility. We need to assess the feasibility of the gateway process in intelligence missions. The gateway process presents a promising new frontier in the collection of intelligence. While preliminary findings are encouraging, further research and careful integration are essential to fully understand and harness its potential. And now, my personal evaluation. I left my body. You can show me all the data, all the graphs, the stories, the numbers, but nothing prepares you from seeing your own goddamn body. And another thing,